Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Chris Joslyn Show. I am your host, not Chris. My name is Jennifer, but I'm here to step in today. And we're actually going to do another episode revolving around the 5 elements of business. Today's topic will be leadership. And during that episode, we will be talking to the famous Chris Joslyn himself. But first, we have to thank our sponsor, Orion Solutions Group. Don't waste any more time trying to find the perfect fit for your team. Trust Orion Solutions Group to help you make the best hiring decisions for your business. Click on the link in the description to find out more. And remember, experts placing experts, Orion Solutions Group. Hi, Chris.
Wow, you are a way better host than that strange-looking bald guy that usually is on here.
Yeah, that one guy. Who is he?
I don't know. Who is that guy?
I don't know. It's hard to remember.
Was it famous or infamous? I'm not sure.
The Chris Joslyn Show. I don't remember his name.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we're back, like I said, for another edition of the 5 Elements of Business, and today's topic is leadership. I'm really excited to hear your insight on some of these questions we're going to talk about
Wow,
today.
what a large subject, too. I know we're going to break this down over several weeks, but leadership is kind of key to the whole thing, really. Right? You got to, if you're going to build a team, if you're going to build a company, if you're going to have something to build towards success, whatever you define that success to be, then you're going to have to look at your own personal leadership, the style involved with that, and maybe the leadership skills of key personnel that you're involving in your company.
Yeah, very true. So in terms of leadership, what do you believe are important aspects to have as a leader in terms of supply chain and logistics industry for both yourself and maybe leaders you've also admired in your class of business?
You know, it's interesting because, personalities are various, and there are successful people, successful companies, and the heads of those companies and various leadership positions throughout those companies are managed by some pretty diverse personalities. And those personalities often show through pretty evidently in their management style, in their leadership style. And I don't think one is really any more imperative than the other. I think success can be nurtured and grown from the perspective of any of those personalities. And we could talk about those. That might be a fun podcast at some point. But from my personal position, I've always felt that a deliberately steady hand is one of the most important elements of being a leader. If you're a volatile person, or if you have a style that swings the pendulum in many directions and very chaotic, it's hard for a team to coalesce around that chaos. It's more important, I think, even if some of those chaotic ideas, some of those things you're trying to achieve are very intuitive and have very high possibility of tremendous success in one direction or another. The chaos itself overwhelms the process. And I believe that we talked last time about kind of planning and how important that is, and strategy and how important that is. And I think that's kind of what I'm talking about with a steady hand. Once your company has a vision, has a mission, and has dedicated itself, and everybody is kind of looked at that and decided that this is going to be the focal point for moving forward, then a steady, deliberate hand from a leadership management standpoint is oftentimes what brings about the success. I mean, it's the old tortoise and the hare kind of scenario, right? Everybody wants to be successful now, immediately, yesterday. We all do. I think that's ubiquitous. But the tortoise maybe too slow, but somewhere in between the tortoise and the hare is where you need to be. And the only way you get that done is steady process. Move forward, reevaluate, recalibrate, and continue to move forward very deliberately.
I imagine a steady hand has been a great benefit to many companies over the past couple of years of volatility in the supply chain industry. And also, besides an asset, something that some companies truly needed in terms of just craziness surrounding them. So in your opinion, what are some of the biggest challenges specifically that are facing leaders in the supply chain logistics industry today?
Well, I think you hit it on the nose. Things, especially over the last 3 years or so. I've been at this now in the logistics industry, the transportation industry, for over 3 decades. I hate to say that out loud, but it's true. And in that time, a lot of chaotic, volatile, transformational circumstances have occurred. Some of those you could look back on and believe one way or another that new rules and regulations, new circumstances in the infrastructure of the transportation logistics community in North America have perpetuated some of the things that ended up occurring. And others are totally unforeseen. You might want to think about it in terms of medicine, really. One of the things we all do when we go in to see our physician is they take our vital signs. You might look like the most healthy, fit person in the whole world coming in. You got you've been outside getting your vitamin D, you've been hiking around, you've been exercising a bit, you've been eating right, all those kinds of things. But underneath the surface, one of the most important things possible is, what are your vital signs? What is your blood pressure, right? What is some of the, when they draw blood, and there's all kinds of things they look at those things for a reason, to give indication for what's below the surface. In the last few years especially, the flow of communication, the flow of transportation, the flow of capacity, whether it's on the ocean or on the railroads or on the roads themselves, have slowed down. It's almost like there's been a blockage in one of the arteries. And when that happens, there's going to be some consequences to that. Now, I think I went off target from what you were asking, but I think that's the kind of thing I think about. So steady hand is great. If you have a mission, if you have a vision, if you have a process, and your team is bought into that and understands that the goal, like we talked about last time, is in cement and it's out there and we're going to achieve that, and here's what we have to do, you still have to be able to be nimble enough, intelligent enough, that when outside circumstances create challenges, you need to recalibrate. You need to be the pilot that's going from here to Hong Kong. And if you're off course, you need to correct that. It's almost exactly what I said last time. You put your goals in cement and your plans in sand, because the plans have to be able to be changed when necessary.
You mentioned vital signs. Mm-hmm. And I think everyone knows that a leadership position not only relies on, obviously, the moves made by one person, or even like a small group of executives at the C-suite level, but also the organization as a whole having their goals aligned with all levels of employees. So what strategies would you take to ensure that your team is motivated to align with the goals of the leadership in the organization?
A lot of companies I've dealt with over the years have one of two major strategies. They either have a top-down strategy, which for private or even public companies, if it's a public company, it's usually a board of directors and the C-suite of executives and things like that. Or for a private company, it's often the person that started the company 35 years ago or something like that, or maybe the second generation that's looking at that. And there's profile they have that they view their company from, a lens that they filtered that they view their company through. And they push down from the top what they believe the numbers show they should be doing. Now, part of that is determined, if you're a public company, determined by your quarterly analysis and your profitability and where your stock is moving, et cetera, like that. And there's a lot of arguments to be made that that's detrimental to the long-term prospects of a company, and that companies tend to go down some difficult pathways for short-term gain when long-term is possible. So there's a balance involved. And then private companies, they don't have to adhere to those same kind of things. So maybe they're thinking long-term, or maybe it's generationally somebody's wanting to retire and cash out, things like that. So there's this top-down push. And that can be very effective if it lines up with the company's collective understanding of where they want that company to go. But that has to be pushed to all the parties involved with that company. And as you said a moment ago, the leadership level. So the other type of company is the one that create a bottom-up, solution-oriented, almost as if it is an employee-owned company. And I know a couple of those in the transportation space, a couple with a lot of success. I've talked to the owner of a company back in Memphis who ran that company from the top down for a long time, but he created an executive team that he basically said, I'm giving this to you guys. And he gave it to the entire I mean, they bought it from them. The employees basically bought it from them. But each of those people are engaged because they're fiscally tied to that company. Now, that can't always be the case. I still believe very firmly that employees need to be engaged and believe that they have a voice in what comes out of that company on the far end. And frankly, from a very pragmatic point of view, typically the entry-level people, the day-to-day customer service people, the people that are operating the type of business we're talking about in the transportation space are frankly more important than the C-suite. They just are. So ignoring those voices is really a recipe for disaster. Eventually, if the goal of the C-suite is to just gin up the margins and the revenue and sell, I understand, because that is the perspective of some folks. But if the idea is this company needs to not only bloom, but it needs to sustain, then that steady hand, the ability to recalibrate, and the ability to not just take top-down instruction, but bottom-up information and blend those together is vitally important.
Yeah, there's certainly a push for more employees to be vocal with their opinions and align personally with the company's strategies in terms of there's a lot of social justice, environmental concerns. So what would you say would be the role of leadership in fostering in 2023 and beyond all this new tech innovation, fuel tech innovation, driving change within the supply chain industry?
You know, there's a convergence occurring quite clearly between what our society has deemed are the structural goals of people's lives. There used to be an old saying, make a good life, not a good living. You know, there's variance on that. And I very much understand because in a lot of this, and I'm, you know, maybe this is partly gender related in a way because I think men kind of often identify themselves as what they do and not who they are. What I mean is if somebody asks me, hey, I'm Chris and I'm a lawyer, or I'm a railroad conductor, or I'm a business owner, or I'm a this and that. Well, that's true, but that's not really who you are. That's what you do. And there's this convergence, though, between looking at your work life and blending it into something larger than that. That's why you have things like all the sustainability things and the governance. So ESGs as blending into a part of what corporate structure is going to look like going into the future. And you can argue both sides of that, and I understand the arguments, and I have some on both sides of those kinds of things because they can be frustratingly difficult to arrange within the culture of a company. Most companies in the past simply look at numbers. Their goal is to get higher revenue, higher margin, and all the employees are a number. Well, that's the wrong thinking too. But we don't want to also say, you know, just come in and work when you want. You know, there's somewhere in between is where these things converge. So again, I'm going a little far afield on what you're talking about. I think that the idea going forward is that work has to be a blended part of your lifestyle, not this siloed thing that you do for 8 hours a day. Though I saw something on the iLevel site the other day that was talking about 10-hour days, 4 days a week and things like that, which I'm a huge advocate of. I think it's a wonderful idea. It doesn't work for every business, every whether it's transportation or otherwise. But I think the idea of working harder for shorter periods allows people to have, lack of a better way to put it, a better life, you know, outside of that, and less definition around what they do as to who they are. Does that make sense? Yeah,
I think many people would agree with you. I know there was a bill introduced into Congress, I think just yesterday, revisiting the idea of a 4-day work week other than a 5, based around, you know, circumstances where that became the norm after the Great Depression and all sorts of reasons there. But you've been talking about key metrics of success in the leadership positions in the supply chain industry in terms of financial KPIs and the ESG, the environmental, social, and governance sort of qualifications that are often put in place in a lot of industries due to not just public pressure, but regulatory concerns from the federal and state level. Past that, What would you say would be some key measures of success to track in terms of leadership, not just in the supply chain industry, but just as a professional? I know you could probably go to a very personal level here. You can keep it surface level if you'd wish, but there's more to life than just money and social pressure, correct?
Yeah, there obviously is. And of course, as you both physically age and age within your career span, well, you learn, right? You know, inevitably you either learn lessons from what has happened to you or you're doomed to repeat them. And unfortunately that can be very bad for you as an individual, whether in career or outside of career. So I think one of the things is actually being reflective and introspective enough about your career arc to recognize not just the things that have quote unquote happened to you, but your responsibility within those. And I that's a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow, because it's very easy to identify circumstantial things that have seemingly come at you and affected your ability to gain financially or grow your business or move in a career to a different part of a business segment or an industry. A lot of things can happen. When someone takes responsibility for their part of those things, I think they grow. They grow as a person, and they grow in their ability to advise, to help the next generation become. I mean, one of the reasons, frankly, that we have the iLevelLogistics.com site in the first place is to give back. It's not just to try to collate or curate or aggregate information or pontificate about what we're doing today. It's not about our ego. People can argue with me out there, type me something in the thing and tell me I'm a blowhard. I don't care. Go right ahead. I've learned a lot in 3 decades. And am I always right? No. But I certainly am able to give you perspective on things. And that's vitally important to moving forward, especially as new generations come on.
Yeah, agreed. Now, you've mentioned iLevel Logistics, but is that how you stay up to date with industry trends and changes?
It's the only thing I go to. Are you kidding me? It's the only thing. No, I mean, there's all kinds of places to look for industry information and periodicals and white papers, and there's TV channels and a lot of different various podcasts. Depending on your segment of the business, you can go and see what the drivers are out doing there. And I mean, the ability to communicate these days, all these different platforms and methods of bringing more information into the sphere, whether you're back when I started this, there were very few logistics oriented or transportation oriented classes you could even take at university. They just weren't there. I mean, you could go to driver school if you wanted to be a driver, things like that. And it was more looked like as a quote unquote trade school, right? But logistics has come out of that. There are portions of it, the supply chain, 3PL, international logistics, bringing in a harmonics to the industry is vitally important, and it requires technologies, it requires data, it requires analytics, it requires a lot of things that it didn't require when I started. You can't win in this industry if you just know how to handle a spreadsheet anymore. If you think that's the way to win, then you're probably with a company that's kind of on its way out. I hate to tell you. Again, I know I'm going off on tangents, but I will tell you this. It's funny. There's a TED Talk that I watched not too long ago. Somebody advised me to watch it, and it was, and I'm not really a classical music person. I'd rather listen to a little jazz, or, I'm a child of the 60s originally. I shouldn't say that out loud, but 80s music is it for me, man. A little Eagles or something like that is awesome. But this talk was from a conductor from the, I think it was the Boston Philharmonic, last name of Zander.
Benjamin Zander.
And so I got recommended that, and also another guy from Israel, Talmud, I believe. But anyway, these guys in particular, Zander's one in particular, he did a little TED Talk. And when you watch that, it's about 15 minutes long or so. And if you watch that, if you look that up and watch it, you'll see a thread through there of, it's a leadership talk about classical music. And if you've ever watched a conductor, sometimes you look at him like, what are they doing there? Why is this guy up there occasionally making little motions with his hands or moving his head or pointing in one direction or doing this different stuff? And there's a lot of people with a lot of different styles. Some are very as I said earlier in this discussion, there are conductors that are very emotional into the nuances of this and that, and there are others that are just barely tapping their hand in a direction or giving the eyebrows or this. It's a form of leadership that I think describes beautifully the way I think about it, because it takes a little bit of everything. Throughout it all, you have to have a person, or in the form of companies, many levels of people that have a steady idea of where they want that music to go, how they want it to start, how they want it to sound in between, and where they want it to end. You have to have that. But along the way, you'll see them giving nods at the trombone section or the violin over here or the cornet there or whatever the case may be. And, that's why they call them a conductor. They're putting the whole thing together to create a symphony, a movement, if you will. I think that kind of spells the whole thing out for me almost better than anything else. When I first got in the transportation business, a good friend of mine got me listening to audio tapes, not CDs, tapes, thank you very much, though it was an actual cassette tape. It wasn't like a 8-track thing, it wasn't quite that old, but tapes on different motivational speakers. And that's much bigger thing today than it was back then. But there were several different people I listened to, and they may be familiar people, but Zig Ziglar was a good one, and he would say certain things in certain ways, and some people would kind of laugh at that stuff and go, I'm motivated by money, or I'm motivated by my next commission check, or I'm motivated by all these different things. But ultimately, the storytelling was hugely important to me, because the ebbs and flows of life, whether it's business or otherwise, kind of require you to be emotionally supported in one moment, taking from that motivation outside or inside the company what you need at that moment, and then a logical realignment of your purpose, whether it's in that day of sales calls, whether it's in that board meeting, or whether it's in a collective barbecue with the drivers to go over a new safety protocol, whatever the case may be. There's an emotional support mechanism and then a logic that has to flow through that. I'm not quite sure I'm defining that correctly, but I guess what I'm saying is it's a blend of things.
I really like hearing about that orchestra level comparison with the conductor. I think that's a really great comparison. You can definitely incorporate that in lots of different industries. But thank you so much, Chris, for talking to us about leadership. Really appreciate it. You do have a wealth of experience there. So, but as you said, leaders, we learn.
I'll leave you with one thing. This is an old saying, and how you go about managing this in your life is really up to the individual. There's a million ways to gain information, and I've mentioned iLevel more than once, so that's a perfect place to do it. iLevelLogistics.com. The saying is, leaders are readers. Truly. They absorb information, they digest that, they put their slant or their view within the context of what they're understanding and reading, and then utilize that. And no matter what I'm a visual person like most. I like to click on the Netflix and watch this and that, and that's a good way to get some information too. But I'm telling you right now, if you take and read just a few minutes every day, just a few minutes to get your mind going in a direction you need to, and align what you're reading with where you want to be, professionally, personally, you'll find it hugely effective, and it's one little tiny step in time. It's incremental to get it done.
Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I love having the chance to talk to you about this kind of stuff.
And everyone, make sure to go to iLevelLogistics.com to see more episodes of The Chris Joslyn Show. We'll be doing 3 more editions of The 5 Elements of Business. We can't wait to have you there. Like, subscribe, and also don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podolo, any of those which you're listening on. We really appreciate it.